Welcome to Transformative Principal. I'm your host, Jethro Jones, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Hey, guess what? I've got a book coming out. How exciting is that? It's called School X, and it's all about helping you as a principal be a designer of your school and not just a manager. So I hope you'll check it out. You can download the free chapter at schoolx.me. So just go to schoolx.me to download the first free chapter. And once you get it, hit reply to the email and tell me what you think. Looking forward to sharing that with you. That's schoolx.me. This episode is brought to you by John Catt Educational, a professional development publisher serving as the global leader in combining both research and practice in all materials. Find timely PD publications to support yourself and your faculty by visiting them online at
TeachFX equips teachers with the instructional strategies and job-embedded feedback they need to get students engaged in virtual or in-person classes. Learn more about TeachFX and get a special offer at teachfx.com/transformativeprincipal. I am excited to be a media partner for the Conrad Challenge. The Conrad Challenge is this amazing educational experience that allows students to create real-world applications to solve problems that we are facing today. It's amazing. Check out more at conradchallenge.org. That's conradchallenge.org.
Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am excited to have back on the podcast today Danielle Nuhfer. Danielle, welcome to Transformative Principal. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jethro. Thank you so much for having me back on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you are very welcome. And we've been in touch since your last episode and, just bouncing ideas off of each other, sharing thoughts and just been there talking with each other. And one of the things you brought up was this idea of teacher mindfulness. So I wanted to make sure I had you on to talk about that and talk about the principal's role in helping teachers manage and have mindfulness. So let's start by talking about what mindfulness is. And we've talked about it on the podcast before and social and emotional health, but let's talk about it in today's perspective with the coronavirus happening and some schools not knowing what they're doing from day to day and being totally stressed out about that. Let's talk about what mindfulness looks like right now in the year 2020.
Okay, so I'll do my best to cover all the ways that this can work in a school, but just to reiterate what mindfulness is, or my understanding, the definition that I use moving forward is that mindfulness is all about bringing awareness to the present moment without judgment. So a lot of people think of mindfulness or may think of mindfulness as, the meditation practice. And that's really not what I'm talking about right now. It's more about paying attention to what's happening in the moment and not judging it. So I think that right now, having a mindfulness practice and just looking around at what is happening and not getting swept away with worry is definitely something that teachers and principals can appreciate trying to have in their lives.
Yeah, and not only that, but something that is necessary and mandatory for what we're all going through right now. That I think that piece about not having judgment about what's going on is especially difficult now when there is so much blame being tossed around from everybody about all the different things that could be causing us to be in the situation we're in.
So that's one of the main things that I started thinking about after COVID happened was how imperative mindfulness could be in helping schools and teachers really take a step back to try to think about how to proceed with the next steps. So this summer, I've really been making it a task of mine to reach out to as many teachers as I possibly can and school districts as I can to just try to talk about the benefits of mindfulness in just own personal self-care, but also in being a resilient person in our students' lives, and also just in how we communicate with one another and how we just proceed through this definite time of uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think that for me, that's the big piece of we're going to be back in front of our kids at some point. Everybody's in a different position on that. But as you're going back in front of your kids, you have to decide what kind of experience your kids are going to have. You have to decide what kind of things you're going to talk about, how you're going to support them, different things like that, and how you're going to talk about this situation as a whole. And that's where I think that this idea of not having judgment is really important, because you need to decide what that's going to look like. And your actions, your words are going to make a huge impact on how your kids perceive things and what they do. So how do we reconcile that? And lots of teachers are very frustrated and angry about all this, and others are angry about the opposite thing. So how do you take that back and have that discussion with the kids, but do it without judgment and be mindful in that moment?
Well, I think one of the main benefits of mindfulness is allowing us to respond instead of react. And when we react to different people and different thoughts and different situations, we just automatically we're just triggered, and we just say the things that we feel right away. But with mindfulness, we maybe take a breath and we think and we respond and we think about. One of the benefits of mindfulness that I have found is that it allows us to see that everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own place that they're coming from as to why something might be a better option for students, or the way the school might need to open, or the way that the schedule is being run. And when we have a mindfulness practice, we might start to, as teachers, we might start to understand, okay, I might not agree with this, and this might not be okay, but they're dealing with their own sort of struggle, or they have a lot on their plate that they might not know, X, Y, or Z. So it might allow us to just not be so quick to react to these situations. And then we model that for our students. So I think that's a really important thing, is just modeling that ability to respond when things aren't going the way that we want them to go is a really, really big piece that our students can really gain from our own mindfulness practice. Just us modeling that for them can be really valuable.
I think that is so, so powerful. Thank you for bringing that up, because everybody does have their own story, and you're not going to know of your kids what their summer or their shutdown time was like, and not to assume the bad things happened or anything like that, but just to recognize that everybody dealt with that differently, and what you experienced at home with your family is not going to be the same as what each kid that's in front of you experienced as well. So I love that idea of seeing that everyone has their own story, and there's no way for us to comprehend everything that goes into that story. And I thought about this recently as I was listening to a podcast with Jocko Willink, and I bring this up because I think it applies really well to what we're talking about. He was saying that when it comes time to make a decision and you have a disagreement with somebody else about what you should do, that you need to take your ego out of it. And if you're a leader, like a teacher or a principal, and you want people to buy into what you're trying to do, the best thing to do is to abandon your plan and buy into somebody else's plan. And I thought that was such an interesting response, because it seems very counterintuitive. And in this situation, as we're talking about this, it does relate. Trust me. I'll get to that in just a moment. What we see is that if we value that somebody else had a different experience and has a different story than we do, and we buy into their story, then that takes pressure off of us to, one, have all the answers, and two, know exactly how to deal with every situation, which we certainly don't. But what I like about that approach is that it then gives us permission to really investigate and learn about their story and what their experience is, without having to have judgment about what their experience was. Did any of that make sense, Danielle? Because I It relayed in my mind just fine, but it might not have come out that way.
No, I completely think that fits because I feel like if you let go of the need to be coming out on top, then you kind of just allow the conversation to be what it is. If you kind of let go of it's the whole idea of would you rather be right or happy? Maybe the being happy is just being able to hear another person's story and where they're coming from without having to push your own agenda.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And as we're dealing with the kids that are in front of us this fall and into the next year, we're going to have lots of opportunities to do that well or to do that poorly.
John Catt Educational supports high-quality teaching and learning by providing publications that are research-based, practical, and focused on the key topics proven essential in today's and tomorrow's schools. The latest John Catt publications include a book whose bold, transformative ideas amaze and infuriate people around the world, according to one reviewer, a title from global leaders in curriculum planning, practice, and retrieval, one book that says stop talking and start doing with regard to teacher well-being, and much more. These books, used by educators of all roles across North America and worldwide, amplify fresh, engaging voices with practical strategies to create
During COVID, every teacher
change.
is a new teacher.
Learn more in our show
That's
notes
why innovative school leaders are turned to TeachFX, whose professional learning platform doubles student engagement online or in person. To learn more about TeachFX and get a special offer, visit teachfx.com/transformative principal.
And so how do we prepare as the adults to be ready to do that well in front of the kids?
I think one of the biggest things that I try to or have tried to provide to teachers that I work with is take some time for yourself to just breathe. It's as simple as that. It can be more complicated, but it doesn't need to be. So in your schedule, maybe take a couple minutes, and it can be as simple as 5 minutes before you go into, your first Zoom meeting or your classroom or however it works. It can be the same sort of schedule no matter what ends up happening, but take 5 to 10 minutes and just get yourself set for the day. And then try to create moments throughout your school day where you do those check-ins. A lot of times teachers, say, well, I don't have time. Or principals will even say, like, I don't have time to ask my teachers to do something more. And really, it's not going to be about doing something more. It's going to be changing intentionally how you do the things you already do. So we're already breathing. It's just bringing awareness to that breathing. We're already taking that time in our car doing something. So let's just take a couple of moments to just focus on us instead of being on our phones. So changing the intention of how we move through our day can bring some of that peace so that we can be the grounded, resilient teachers that our students need and the resilient leaders that our teachers need.
Yeah, and what I like about that is that idea of you're not asking people to do something more, you're asking them to do what they're already doing differently. And that can be very powerful in and of itself. And so often we think, this is just another thing that I've got to keep track of or another thing that I've got to do. And nobody wants to live like that. I mean, we want stuff off of our plates, not more added onto it. And that's something that I tried with my teachers to say a lot is don't just think of this as another thing. Think of this as the way we do things. And I like your way a little bit better, that it's not doing more, it's changing what you're already doing. And I think that perspective is better than what I would say to my teachers because, they were like, well, I don't want to change what I'm doing. I don't want to do things in that way. I want to do them the way I've always done them because I'm comfortable and I like it. And why should I change and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really good advice. You mentioned preparing yourself for the day. What are some practical tips that you can give to tell people how they can prepare for each day?
I'm a proponent, and this isn't for everybody. So, this is something that you could tailor to your own schedule and what the demands are in your morning. But I'm a real proponent for some kind of morning routine. And that could be something and what I like to call it is quiet time. And whatever that quiet time could be, it could be reading a devotional, it could be going for a little walk, it could be taking 5 minutes in your car before you go into school, it could be something active like, a quick workout, it could just be sitting and listening to a guided mindfulness practice, but something that is for you that really starts your day in a way that you are then set for the rest of your day. Like it's that building block. So taking just, and it can be longer than that and it can fluctuate. When I teach a lot of my teachers the mindfulness practices, I like to encourage them to get curious about what works and what doesn't. So again, if we're bringing mindful awareness to it, we're not judging ourselves for something not working. People often say, I'm not a morning person, or I can't possibly get up that much earlier. Well, maybe try it. And if it doesn't work, then do something different. So get curious about what could work in the morning. And then if that doesn't work, then play around with, maybe it's a lunchtime couple moments that you just check in with yourself. So my biggest thing would be some kind of something in the morning that fits with you and what you like to do. Not any sort of like, I should be doing this, or we don't want to guilt and shame people.
Yeah. And you need to take the time to figure out what does actually work. So I have this song that I love to listen to. It's a Russian song called Kon, and that means horse. And when I listen to that song, it helps put me in the right frame of mind for whatever I need to accomplish. And I usually use that song to help get me fired up for something that I need to go and accomplish. Like, I use it before job interviews. I use it before webinars or other things like that I do, that it helps me like get in the frame of mind of I can accomplish hard things and it's not too challenging to do. And so, that for me, that works. But that song has a really particular meaning to me that is very deep. And, not everybody's going to have that same reaction. So I appreciate what you're saying, because if you, were to say, okay, we'll do this and it'll work. Well, that's not necessarily true. You've got to do what's going to work for you. And it may take some time to figure that out. And one of the best uses for my prep period when I was a teacher is I used it to take a nap many days. And people laugh when I say that, but the reality is I needed to like reset myself. And my prep period was right in the middle of the day, the time that I was doing this. And it was exactly what I needed. I didn't take a long one. I took a 5-minute power nap, sometimes 10 minutes, but it was a short, intentional thing to do that made me so much better for my students later, that it was almost mandatory at that time, because I had 2 little kids who were waking up all the time, and I really needed to just recharge and reset. And whatever it is that you need to do, I think it's important what you're saying, Danielle, is to just make sure that it's something that is going to help you personally prepare.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I used to do the same thing with a nap, but it was in my car after school, and I would do a 5 or 10 minute power nap, and my husband thought I was crazy, but I did, and it made all the difference in the rest of my day. So I'm totally about the power naps.
Yeah, naps are really good. So in closing, Danielle, can you tell us about how people can learn more from you and what they can get, how they can learn some of these techniques directly from you?
Certainly. So if you check out teachingwell.life, so the website teachingwell.life, you can find out all the things that I'm doing with mindfulness and self-care for teachers. And I'd love to also direct you to teachingwell.life/mindful classroom, because that's going to give you 10 ways to bring mindfulness to a classroom situation. So I think this is a really great technique to start implementing, not necessarily teaching kids, but it's ways that teachers can implement some mindfulness into their classroom in those, moments where they really need to regroup and to maybe have a shift or transition in their classroom period. So those two places, and you could also catch me on Instagram at TeachingWellDanielle.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. And the last question that I ask is, what is one thing, based on all we've talked about today, that a principal can do this week to be a transformative principal?
I think that it's to walk the walk. So for me, this week, if every principal listening could try to do something in regard to mindfulness, get curious and explore their own maybe mindfulness routine, and share that, get vulnerable with your staff and tell them what worked and what didn't in some sort of way. It doesn't need to be at a big faculty meeting, but maybe you passing that on to your staff, it will give them permission to try some of these things and see that it can help in the way that they show up for their students.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And you don't have to go brag about it, but just sharing what you're doing that's working, I think, is always a good place to start. So Danielle, thank you so much for being part of Transformative Principal. You can get links to her website and the show notes, jethrojones.com/podcast. And you can learn more about Danielle at teachingwell.life/mindful classroom. And again, Danielle, thank you so much for being part of Transformative Principal.
All right, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to our valued partner, John Catt Educational. If you are a leader looking to make transformative change by providing yourself and your leaders and teachers with professional development that is research-based and rigorous, yet easy to digest and full of practical strategies, check out the latest publications from John Catt. Visit us.johncattbookshop.com to find information on bulk orders or learn much more in our show notes. You can also use the code TRANSFORMATIVE to save a bundle at us.johncattbookshop.com. School principals across the country are using TeachFX's virtual PD and job-embedded feedback to boost student engagement during COVID. With TeachFX, teachers get 8 times more feedback and generate 144% more student engagement on average in a school year with no additional work for school leaders or teachers. To learn more about TeachFX and get a special offer, visit teachfx.com/transformativeprincipal.